Guys, I've had a lot of time to ponder about this, and I've come to a pretty stark realization. Killing people is wrong. Now, I know, I love taking an axe to someone's head just as much as the next guy. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever thought about the fact that killing people might hurt their feelings? Before this realization, my morning routine was very simple. Take as many illicit drugs as possible, bark and chase the nearby homeless population, and then kill as many twigmen as I could before I tired myself out. However, for today's challenge, I'll be turning over a new leaf. Can I, Bob Abdul-Jabbar, make $100,000 as a peaceful farmer in Kenshi? As a peaceful farmer, things like killing, stealing, and hurting people are completely prohibited. Sadly, these just so happen to be the most profitable ways to make money in Kenshi. But don't worry, Bob Abdul-Jabbar is a cunning fellow and doesn't need these nefarious acts to succeed in life. Instead of participating in acts of narco, we'll be making boatloads of cash by being racist.
Kick that
Hiver.
off the plane!
I mean, farming. We'll make cash by farming. So the first thing I do is set out to find some hard-earned cash. As I begin my travels, I run into a group of hard-working supervisors motivating their lazy workers. The man reminds me to engage in my daily prayers, and I thank him for teaching the delinquents the right path. Shortly after speaking with the man, I run into some Holy Nation soldiers who had just finished up a battle. Now, as many of you know, the Holy Nation is constantly in an ongoing war with three factions in Kenshi. The first is the United Cities. Okran simply does not like capitalism. The second is, of course, minorities. If you are a minority in the Holy Nation territory, this is all the Holy Nation soldiers see.
Egg-led murderer! Hold your fire! This man isn't black! What?
And last and often forgotten is the river raptors. Because the river raptors are always trying to eat holy crops, there is a constant war between the critters and the Holy Nation. However, one man's trash is Bob Abdul-Jabbar's treasure. After skinning these fallen raptors, I'm able to pawn off over $2,000 worth of skins without ever having to engage in combat. In order to start off my new life as a pacifist farmer, I'm gonna need around $10,000. Now I know what you're thinking. Who in the hell needs $10,000 to start a farm? All you need is some damn seeds and some water. And you know, I have to say, you're completely right. I'm gonna be honest. The $10,000 isn't at all for farming. It's to feed my crippling alcohol addiction. In order to engage in pacifistic behavior, I need about a gallon of alcohol a day to subdue my violent urges. $10,000 worth of alcohol isn't quite enough to indefinitely black out, but don't worry. I have a plan for that later. After realizing how much money I can get from the river raptors, recently I've become a bit of a combat cuck. If there's fighting, best believe I'm watching. I'm watching from afar. I'm watching up close. I'm even watching while sleeping. And when everyone's finished, I ripe the benefits of the battle by sneaking in and getting as much skin as I can. However, I'm having a bit of a problem. Being a cuck is simply too profitable. So much to the point where I don't even have room to hold all the skin I'm grabbing. So in order to be a true skin connoisseur, I'll need to travel down the road to Blister Hill. That way I can purchase a backpack that'll allow me to double my cuckoldery profits. As I began my travel to the new town, I run into a bandit and a Holy Nation mercenary engaging in a battle to the death. And of course, I can't help but to watch. After the bandit falls down to the ground, I reach over and grab his stuff. However, as I go to grab it, I realize he's still alive. As I mentioned earlier, I've turned over a completely new leaf, and stealing is completely behind me. But it's not stealing if you're taking from a dead man. So I began a new journey of cuckoldery. Instead of watching people engage in combat, Bob Abdul-Jabbar was going to wait until this man died in front of him. So I waited and watched and waited and watched until finally the bandit had succumbed to the blow dealt to his chest. And just like that, we're now dripped the fuck out. So far, Bob Abdul-Jabbar has ethically sourced over $5,000 in funds and even gotten an entire wardrobe without ever harming a soul. Guys, I hate to say it, but I think I'm a little too good at this whole peaceful thing. After some time traveling, I finally made it to the capital of the Holy Nation, Blister Hill. Here, I walked my way over to a shop where I met a cashier who seemed to be cosplaying as a Viking. Nonetheless, I was able to buy a trader's backpack for $800. This backpack would be absolutely pivotal for carrying as many skins as humanly possible. Once I had equipped this backpack, it was very clear why no one had dared to mess with Bob Abdul-Jabbar. From the front, Bob looked like nothing more than a weak, starving bottom who went to Weenie Hut Jr.'s for breakfast. However, from the side, Bob resembled Flats the Flounder. It was clear that his side profile was acting as some sort of primitive repellent that scared off all potential foes. And this backpack somehow made Bob's side profile look even more dangerous. Now that Mr. Abdul-Jabbar has a way to carry more materials, it's time to initiate our plan to become a farmer. In order to become a farmer, we're gonna need 3 things: a crop to plant, research for farming, and last but not least, a farmhand. Thankfully, getting crops as a Holy Nation citizen is extremely easy. Holy Nation citizens are allowed to farm as much as they want from the communal holy farms. However, as I mentioned, I want my own farm, so I'll just be using them temporarily. At first, I wasn't sure why this wasn't considered stealing by the Holy Nation. However, once you spend your time watering crops, waiting for them to grow, all just for a bunch of river raptors to eat all your hard work, you'll understand why the farmers have just completely given up over controlling what crops they lose. I farmed all day and night, gathering as much wheat as I could. There were many failures with my farming technique, but thankfully, from time to time, Holy Nation soldiers would stop by to cheer me on. After spending days traveling from farm to farm, getting as much wheat as I could, it was time for me to build a place to store all my crops. So I dropped about $2 grand on my first home. It was a bit of a fixer-upper, but let's be real. In this economy, this shit was a steal. After journeying out to get more raptor skins with my backpack, I was able to sell them off and buy enough materials to fix up my shack. I then researched as much as I could about farming to get my business up and running. After much time learning, farming, and cucking, I finally had enough resources and knowledge to make my own farm. But farming is hard work. So in order to build a farm, I'll need to have a farmhand. Now, there's plenty of ways to get someone to help out on your farm. There's slavery, there's paying a skilled worker, and there's even hiring illegal immigrants to do your farming for you. However, despite some of these options being peaceful, none of these options are free. If you can't tell by now, I'm a bit of a cheapskate. I use other people's resources, I steal other people's skins, and I even sleep in other people's beds. So the most cost-effective method I'll be going for to obtain a farmhand is slavery. But not just any slavery. I'll be using domestic slavery in order to obtain a hard worker, otherwise known as marriage. It was very hard to choose who would be my wife, but ultimately I needed a wife who would work the hardest. I did a lot of trespassing, breaking and entering, and stalking to find the perfect wife. But when I walked in on the absolute ugliest woman I've ever seen in my life, I knew she was the one. This was not the face of a woman with soft, liberal boy hands. This was the face of a woman who had seen a lot of hard times in life and a lot of drug use. So shortly after meeting her, I asked for her hand in marriage and took her with me to get married at the Holy Temple. As I stared longingly into her loving eyes on our wedding day, I was reassured that this woman would save me an unfathomable amount of money. After sealing the deal of our marriage with a ring, it was time for Bob Abdul-Jabbar and wifey Abdul-Jabbar to start their first farm. Bob and his wife finally made it out the trenches. They began construction of a house that didn't have a caved-in roof. They made a well for water, and if they ever needed more crops for their farm, they'd just borrow wheat from the nearby Holy Nation farms. Everything was going great.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass
song, boy.
Or at least it was until we received our first demands. Dust bandits came by threatening our lives, so we had to pay them off in order to not get killed. This left us with barely $2,000 after all of our expenses and being robbed. On top of that, selling wheat just wasn't cutting it, and Bob was starting to get the shakes from his alcohol withdrawals. So the same way that Jesus turned water into wine, we turned wheat straw into grog. And eventually we had Wifey Jabbar working around the clock 24/7 to pump out as much of that good old liquor as she could. However, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Jabbar has a bit of an alcohol problem. He patiently waited for his wife to crunk out as much liquor as she could, and when she least expected it, he struck, stealing as much alcohol as he could. He was later found blackout drunk outside a holy temple, saying slurs about the Holy Lord Phoenix. So the paladins had to rightfully discipline him, and he spent the night in jail. While Bob spent his time in jail, Wifey Jabbar was left alone to tend to the farm. While she was watching the house, a prayer day decided to come. Now, normally the Holy Nation would kill her for being alone without a male partner. However, it was clear to me that my wife was truly a keeper. My wife was so ugly that the holy priest was convinced she was a man. This allowed her to do the entire prayer day service without any male attendance. Now, if that's not a good investment, I don't know what is. After Bob got released from prison, it was time to fast forward our alcohol growing operation. However, as I got back home, I was met with a rude awakening. River raptors. River raptors began closing in on my crops, and I still had so much wheat that I needed to harvest. I rushed Bob to the farm and harvested as much as I could, but in the end, the river raptors won. They absolutely devoured my farm before I could even get half of the wheat. I was forced to retreat and watched in cuckoldery as they ate everything that belonged to me. When they were done, me and Mrs. Jabbar were left with nothing but an empty field. At this point, it was clear to me that if I was going to be a peaceful farmer who keeps my hands clean, I still needed someone else to handle the dirty work. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our newest member of the family, Bull Abdul Jabbar. Not only was he going to be responsible for relocating tons of wheat back and forth between the holy farms to our grog machine, but he would also be responsible for warding off any river raptors that come looking for trouble. Now, our challenge states that we cannot hurt, kill, or steal anything, but it states nothing about the morality of a wild bull mollywopping a river raptor. So while we do the farming, Bull Abdul will take care of any trespassers. After spending hard work and time repurposing wheat from other farms into our own, I was able to make $15K worth of cash by selling my untested, non-FDA approved bathtub grog to the local hiver populations. Now this might sound good, but in order to make this $15K, I spent damn near $10K on resources, $10K on security, $5K on paying Bob's bail after getting blackout drunk, $2K on stopping dust bandits from killing me, and on top of all of this, making this $15K took 5 days for me to make enough alcohol to sell. Between Bob's alcohol addiction and the recession, this isn't nearly enough for me to make $100K. But then I thought to myself, do you know what's more profitable than selling alcohol? Selling drugs. While selling grog is worth no more than 1K per grog, selling a kilo of hashish is worth almost 10 times the amount. The only downside is growing hashish is completely illegal, and I have no clue how to become a drug lord. So I went to the only place where I could learn how, the swamp. The swamp is the natural spawn point of crackheads, and here you can find anybody selling hashish straight out of their bathtubs. So of course, I went to the first person I could find to smuggle some drugs and materials to grow them back in my farm. Hey, yo man, you got any of the good stuff? Yeah, man, what you want? We got dirty ass blaster, fruity fuck pebbles, Girl Scout rhino, granddad banana monkey, hairy smegma, and strawberry shit shark. I'll just take the traditional drugs, dude. I don't know. Yeah, we got that too. Here you go. After buying as much drugs and hemp as I could possibly carry, I stopped and found another farmer who said she'd be willing to help me get my drug operation started up. She mentioned she had a lot of knowledge on how to start a hashish farm. She said the only requirement is that we got her ass as far as we could from the swamp. As someone who almost died to several man-eating blood spiders just trying to get here, I completely understand why you wouldn't want to live in the Australia simulator of Kenshi. So I grabbed her and ran as fast as I could back to my base. As I traveled home with my new indentured servant, Wifey Jabbar had made 7 grogs. After subtracting at least 2 for Bob, that left us with a total of 5k worth of profit. Although Mrs. Jabbar had a beautiful talent for fooling men and creating bathtub grog, her skills were needed elsewhere. If I was gonna make money smuggling drugs, I needed someone with a loose butthole who could smuggle said drugs. Now, Mew needs to start up our drug farm, and I'm not shoving 5 kilos of hashish up my ass, so Mrs. Jabbar is gonna have to be the next best thing. Now, I'm no expert on selling drugs, but if I've learned anything from the CIA, it's that if you want to sell untested drugs, you should start in minority communities. So the first thing I did is make my way back to the same high village I went to earlier. There, I was able to make almost 10k after selling a combination of hashish and grog to the local hiver population. This money was pretty damn good. However, if I was gonna make some real money, I needed to acquire a permanent drug mule. For those of you not familiar, a drug mule is a person who transports illegal drugs by swallowing them or concealing them in a body cavity. By using Mrs. Jabbar's butthole, we were only able to transport 4 to 6 grams of hashish at a time. But if we were able to find someone with a looser, more flexible anal cavity, we could transport up to 50 kilos of hashish through the interdimensional pocket of their butthole. The best part is, I knew the perfect person for the job. Meet Beep. Beep is a hiver who spends his time in a city surrounded by cannibalistic fogmen. When I asked Beep if he'd be willing to offer up his butthole for the greater good of the world, he answered, Beep. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, but I'm gonna assume it meant yes. So I took Beep back home with me, where his only job would be to act as my permanent portable storage container. Because Beep is a hiver, he won't be able to help with any of the outside tasks of the farm. So for now, I just told him to stand in the corner and make sure he doesn't get caught. After spending almost all of my money getting my drug farm operation up, I finally built my first hashish processor, and it was time to turn all of the valuable hemp I had farmed into a drug that could sell for tons of cash. After spending day and night making as much hashish as possible, it was finally time for us to do our first large-scale drug sale. I loaded all 35 kilos of hashish into Beep's ass, and because doing this puts the person containing said drugs into a completely immobile state, I had Mrs. Jabbar carry Beep all the way to Flats Lagoon. We traveled till the butt crack of dawn, until finally we made it. Just this sale alone had yielded me over 41k worth of cash, and it was clear to me that all I needed to complete this challenge was one more good sale.
No. Wait.
But then it hit me. Normally, people would have paid an absolute fortune for this absurd amount of drugs being hand delivered to them. But the pay that I got was only subpar. That's when I realized other Holy Nation farms are probably doing the exact same thing as me. This is causing the prices of all of my drugs to go down significantly. So the only way to become the absolute richest and most peaceful farmer will be to become the only farmer. Remember our security guard, Bull Abdul Jabbar? Well, he met a nice wild bull while passing by, and they had babies. And those babies had even more babies. And those babies made triple the amount of babies, and then quintuple. Until finally, we had a bull army powerful enough to terrorize those drug trafficking Holy Nation farmers. Peacefully, of course. You know, I find it somewhat peaceful to know that no matter what you do in life, you always end up back where you started. I started off my life combat cucking, just to end up combat cucking with my ugly ass wife and some dude with an asshole full of so many drugs that he can't even muster a word. The circle of life is truly beautiful. And if you're lucky, one day you too will end up with a masculine looking hard worker for a wife. Anyways, once all the other Holy Nation farms were destroyed, I could focus on my true craft, being a peaceful farmer. However, it seems like there are people in the world who do not pursue peace as much as I do, because now the Holy Nation is blaming me for the mysterious attacks that took place on their farmers. And within a matter of hours, they will send forth an army that not even my bulls could protect me against. So there's only one thing to do. After letting the bulls run wild on the Holy Nation, me and wifey Jabbar escaped our peaceful farm and shoved almost 100 kilos worth of hashish up Beef's ass. As the Holy Nation raided our home and killed our indentured servant, we retreated to the desert where we sold 99k worth of hashish after passing through several contraband checkpoints. In order to complete this challenge, I only needed $1,000 more. However, I didn't have any hashish or alcohol on me, but I did still have two very valuable assets. My wife and my drug mule had helped me so much to get to where I am today. So in order to make my last $1,000 and give back to the community, I thought it would only be right that I sold them off into slavery. This way, they could help others just as much as they helped me. With that being said, we have officially completed our challenge. I have made $100,000 as a completely peaceful farmer in Kenshi. We didn't harm anyone, we didn't kill anyone, and we didn't steal anything. Bob Abdul-Jabbar is a completely self-made man who is able to suppress his violent urges through healthy coping mechanisms like alcoholism and slavery. With that being said, I think it's safe to mark this challenge as a success. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like. And if you want more content like this, check out my hour-long video where I extract human brains out of their buttholes and turn them into robots. With that being said, I love you guys and I'll see you in the next one.